if you look at the the daily combat, though, Hamas is still, Israel was supposed to have taken control of northern Gaza a long time ago, and yet every day there's places where Hamas is emerging from the tunnels and killing Israelis. Same with Khan Yunis in the central part. Israel doesn't control that either, and Israel's talking about making a move on Rafah, but they won't control that either. They will kill a lot of civilians, and this is tragic. But I believe that Hamas made a horrible, calculated decision from the very beginning that this was the only way to defeat Israel. You see, Israel has said that victory will be defined by the political elimination of Hamas, that Hamas will no longer be a political entity capable of governing Palestinians. They also said that Hamas will be destroyed militarily, that Hamas will never be able to replicate anything close to what happened on October 7th. Every day Hamas shows that it hasn't been destroyed militarily. They continue to resist. They continue to inflict very heavy casualties on the Israelis. And, just take a look at what happened in Moscow. Hamas was invited to Moscow by Russia, along with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, because Russians know that Hamas is here, and that the Russians also know that Israel and the United States will use Hamas's political survival as an excuse not to engage meaningfully on a two-state solution. So Russia's working with Hamas and the PLO to create a new singular governing entity that combines Hamas with the PLO, can be renamed so that we can say it's not Hamas. We can say that it's this Palestinian entity. So the notion is that if Hamas is part of this, then Hamas will be controlled by the collective as opposed to running its own thing. Whether or not Hamas and the PLO can agree on this, there's a lot of bad blood there. But you saw that the prime minister stepped down, his government stepped down, because they will be replaced by something new. And the Russians want it to be replaced by this new singularity that isn't called Hamas, but contains Hamas, and Hamas, because Hamas has a lot of legitimacy now with the Palestinian people. And so I think politically the Israelis are screwed because of what Russia has done. It's really outflanked them. Militarily, it's unsustainable. Ramadan is coming up, very important time of the year for the Islamic community. And the feeling is that if Israel makes a move on Rafah or carries out bread massacres during Ramadan, that right now there's been some restraint on the part of Israel's Arab neighbors, and because historically speaking, none of them really like the Palestinians to begin with. But those are political and economic elites. At the street level, amongst the Arab street, so to speak, there's great sympathy for the Palestinians. And during Ramadan, during this very religious period of time for the Islamic faith, there's a chance, the Arab states fear that the street could become enraged and turn on them. And so I think you're going to see Israel losing a lot of the, I won't call it political support, but a lot of the political apathy on the part of the Arab nations during Ramadan. And I think you're going to see the whole world become very focused on bringing this thing to an end. Israel's lost the world. The only nation that supports Israel is the United States. And the United States is rapidly saying we can't support this much longer. So Israel's in a very big bind. That's why a war with Hezbollah could appear attractive, because what it does is it redefines the military nature of this conflict in a way that doesn't just focus on the Gaza battle, but now a bigger battle that dilutes the impact of Gaza, because there will be something bigger going on in Lebanon. So there's a lot of attraction on the part of the Israelis, who believe that they need to sustain this fight. And you sustain this fight by making it a bigger fight. But the problem is that requires American backing, not just with Hezbollah, but with Iran, who supports Hezbollah. Because there's a risk that if Israel goes into a full-scale conflict with Hezbollah, that Iran could become involved too. And now we have a regional conflict that's just a nightmare for everybody. The other thing is that there's no guarantee that Israel will prevail in a fight against Hezbollah. not just a repeat of 2006, where Israel goes in, tries to drive them back to the Litani River, and can't achieve it. So it's a stalemate, which becomes, by definition, a victory for Hezbollah. But in 2006, the Lebanese people paid a huge price for for Hezbollah's action. Remember, the 2006 conflict was started when Hezbollah launched a raid into Israel to kidnap some Israeli soldiers to create hostages that could be exchanged for some people that Hezbollah wanted released. And the Lebanese are like, hey, your little thing caused us a lot of problems. And since then, Hezbollah has morphed into not just a resistance movement, but a governing body. They're political. They're vested in the government of Lebanon. They are the government of Lebanon. They're part of it. And so the last thing Hezbollah wants to do, because if they alienate themselves from the Lebanese people, they're no longer effective in terms of government. They may get kicked out of the government. They may be marginalized. They don't want that. They fought too long and hard to get to where they're at. So they can't allow a war to break out with Israel that will bring harm to the Lebanese people in a way that gets fingers are pointed at Hezbollah. For a war to break out, they need Israel to be the aggressor. They need Israel to initiate something. And then Hezbollah can say, this is just self-defense, and the whole Arab world will back them up on this. Israel has to understand that, that's a trap. Hezbollah is playing this it's a dangerous game, but it's a necessary game to relieve pressure for Hamas. There's this escalating exchange of fire taking place, and it's substantial. Israel has suffered losses, Hezbollah has suffered losses, but they've kept it short of a full-scale conflict. If a full-scale conflict breaks out, first of all, there's a good chance that a big part of the fighting will be done in northern Israel, because Hezbollah said, we're not just going to let you come to Litani, we're coming to you. We're going to take Kiryat Shimon. We're going to take other towns, and we're going to dig in, and we're going to make you come in and liberate these towns and destroy these towns. That'll be on you. And then we plan on not losing this battle, but keep coming in, because we've dug the tunnels, and we plan on taking northern Israel up to Galilee. Also, Hezbollah has long-range precision strike rockets that, if they can evade Iron Dome, then Israel's in trouble, but they'll definitely overwhelm Iron Dome, meaning that there's only so many missiles that Iron Dome can shoot down until they run out of interceptors, and Hezbollah will keep firing stuff in, and they'll overwhelm the Israelis. Israel could very well lose a war with Hezbollah, and I think that's one of the things the United States is telling them, is that we don't have, and here's the other reality, we don't have sufficient power to weigh in on Hezbollah in a decisive way, or Iran. Hell, we can't even get the Houthi to do what we want them to do right now. The Houthi, we've been bombing them. We're supposed to deter them, scare them. They're not scared. They just keep doing what they do. And if we can't, beat the Houthi, you really think we're going to beat Hezbollah? You think we're going to beat Iran? Of course not. So I think, again, like the situation with Ukraine, I think the Biden administration's having a strategic rethink, because it's amazing how clarity suddenly comes into play during an election year, especially when your policies are failing. And the Biden administration knows normally foreign policy doesn't play a role in presidential elections. James Carville's old saying, "It's the economy, stupid," that he told Bill Clinton back in 1992, I believe, is applicable today, unless you really screw the pooch. And that appears to be what the Biden administration is doing with Ukraine. That's why we see Newland out, new policy thinking in. They've got to stabilize the situation before the election comes. And the same thing right now with Gaza. This needs to be stabilized. The last thing the United States wants or needs, or I should say, the last thing the Biden administration wants or needs right now, is an expanded war with Hezbollah that just continues this nightmare that results in further isolation of America globally. The global South is condemning us, calling us facilitators of genocide, the whole thing. So I think that, this is an important meeting with Benny Gantz to lay down the marker that we won't be with you if you go against Hezbollah. If Hezbollah attacks you on their own volition, of course we'll support you. But if you initiate the aggression against Hezbollah, large scale, we're not with you on this one. We want this thing over. We want a ceasefire. We want it. Although when we want it, because Kamala Harris, her famous statement that, We insist on a ceasefire, a ceasefire. And then she pauses because that's the soundbite that's going to be played.
Yeah.
In 6 weeks before Rona or whatever she said, then she came out with this total BS thing. And it's like, you really don't want a ceasefire, do you? You're just throwing away words. But the U.S. is under a lot of pressure right now internationally to bring an end to this conflict. And I think you're going to see the United States trying to put more and more pressure on Israel.
And it seems like the United States is especially the current administration is going to have to. I don't know if you saw, Scott, but in a primary, Biden, there were votes. I mean, this is a Democratic primary. There is no opposition. He's the incumbent. He was 100,000 plus or so, basically no confidence votes, but really no preference, basically not voting for Joe Biden as a statement because of this. That in and of itself is just unprecedented. But at the same time, his polling numbers are way down. The rumors, even just domestically, of strongholds of Arab and Muslim practicing populations in places like Michigan, a disaster. And then, of course, the situation abroad, it's looking terrible. I mean, when you have China at the ICJ confirming that Palestine has the right to armed resistance, which I thought was huge at the end of February. And then what you mentioned with Russia was just, it was genius with Fatah, Hamas meeting in Moscow, and Putin's and Russia's formulation of, hey, this needs to be a united bloc. This needs to be a government or a leadership of Palestine rather than, Hamas, which is, of course, at this moment the most popular of the resistance groups, given what it's been doing. But it needs to be it's genius in a sense, because in my estimation, the whole point of a lot of Israel and the United States' policy toward Palestine has been to keep the Palestinian leadership very divided. It has been about, you have the PA in the West Bank, and then you have Hamas in Gaza, and they're not supposed to be together. And here you have Russia meeting with these groups saying, how about a unity government? And you don't have any such. Then you have Netanyahu in the United States on the outside. They are not involved in such deliberations because, as you said, there isn't any meaningful movement toward a real ceasefire. The United States claims the United States is the one vetoing at the United Nations Security Council all the resolutions. And of course, you have Israel. Israel has been very resistant to any kind of meaningful, even just a longer term, short term ceasefire, if that makes any sense. So just your reactions to those. I feel like all of that speaks to you mentioned the military dangers for, if we call it the empire, so to speak, the United States, Israel, and all the players involved on their side. But politically too, it's a disaster. And it feels like, while on the one hand there's a lot of pressure on the United States to change, it feels like that disaster is only going to grow larger and larger before then.
Well, the United States has lost control of the situation in the Middle East. We still are, at least on paper, the most influential power. We're the one that all nations look to for a solution, but we don't have a solution. I mean, there is a solution, but we're unwilling to do what's necessary to make that solution, that is to put pressure on Israel. But things are changing right now. I think Israel's looking strategic defeat straight in the eyes. There will be no returning to the status quo once this war is over. Israel has burned too many bridges. The world has caught on. Like you said, you have China, speaking truth to the International Court of Justice about Israel, about the Palestinian relationship. So I think the United States is going to have to transition away from trying to preserve the status quo, which was sort of our policy, to how to manage the Israeli transition. And because Israel is going to have to make a transition from this Zionist, singularity into a state that, at a minimum, accepts a viable two-state solution. And that's going to require tremendous political upheaval in Israel, and so we're going to have to help facilitate that. That process, and that's where the United States is. I think we're looking at major, you know, I think the midnight oil is being burned in Washington D.C. and the Middle East branches of the CIA, of the State Department, of everybody, because we have to come up with a new policy direction and how we're going to implement it and where we're going to put our diplomatic effort on and how do we de-emphasize the military solution, because we've embarrassed ourselves with what we've done with the Houthi. We've lost all ability to talk about effective military deterrence. Nobody's afraid of American military power right now. Maybe they should be, but they're not, because the Houthi have shown you can stand up to America and ain't nothing. I mean, it is what it is. You're getting bombed, but no, we can take it. So I think right now we're looking at a situation. Again, it's a very dangerous situation. Israel could do something precipitous like expand the war in Hezbollah, but I think we're looking at the reality. I saw somebody's comment: Israel's economy is down. But Israel's economy is not going to recover. Israel's not going to recover. I think one of the logical things that's going to happen is that you're going to see this edifice Israel has created, this policy edifice that talks about the greater Israel, is going to start to be chipped away. I think one of the things that's going to break Israel's back is when Israel is going to have to delegitimize the West Bank settlements that they've been putting in, because it's incompatible with international law. It's incompatible with anything. And if there's going to be a Palestinian state, that has to be undone. And for Israel to undo that is going to create a crisis in Israel. And I think you're going to start to see Israel shrinking population-wise. We already see many Israelis fleeing the country. I mean, but that's because of war. But I think basically Israelis are going to start to lose faith in the Israeli enterprise as it was sold. And there's not going to be too many Israeli citizens that want to hang around for a two-state solution. So I think you're going to see the depopulation of Israel over the course of the next day. Israel's been strategically defeated. I know there's people, no, they haven't. They're winning. They're doing this and that and the other thing. Just try and project yourself forward. How does Israel sustain this? And they can't. Economically, it's unsustainable. Their economy is in the dumps. Politically, the world will continue to isolate Israel if they continue this greater Israel policy. It will have to change, and you're going to have to start taking down important political constituencies, like the fanatic settlers are going to have to be tamed, and that's going to create a huge crisis. So I think Israel's not in a good position right now. They're in a very bad position. And I think that's one of the things that Benny Gantz is being, the reality is sinking into him that, there isn't going to be a status quo, that there's going to have to be change. And he's not the leader to help them guide through the change. None of the people currently in power are. Israel's going to have to find a new generation of leaders to get them through. I just want to say one thing. Again, I'm told not to read the comments, but I saw somebody in there. Screw the pooch does not mean what you thought it meant. It's a flying term. If you ever were in the Air Force or you were in the Air Wing of the Marine Corps or in the Navy, screwing the pooch means making a big mistake when you're flying. If you screwed the pooch, that means that basically you're shot down, you're punching out, you're under, under a parachute. So take your mind out of the gutter. And for all the censors out there, I didn't say something that was obscene. It was a military term.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to consult with your wife about your no looking at the comments policy. But I do. I mean, yeah, it's the moderators can also take care of any any comments that are distracting you. But Scott, what you were saying about this made me think, and we can close on this. Was for all that you just described, it made me think, for Palestine, for Gaza, for Palestine, broader Palestine proper, the resistance isn't going to go away. And Israel has taken this monumental step it always had somewhat of an extreme policy when it came to, of course, its position and treatment of the Palestinians. But it's taken this huge step forward that has, of course, ignited not just the resistance in Palestine, Hamas, etc., regionally and, of course, globally. And on the one hand, you said that Israel is going to have to be reshaped. It's going to have to tone this down. The United States is likely going to try to make efforts to do that. And on the other, I could also see a possibility where Israel continues to fight. I mean, if there's going to be fighting, regardless, this has been the history. There's been intermittent fighting at larger scales, mowing the lawn, all of that. But I could see Israel just always being on this kind of more intense mobilization for war to some degree, maybe not to the extent now, but to some degree, which then will lead to all those problems that you closed with about the economy and about, just its legitimacy as a whole, its government's legitimacy, then leading to a general decay and weakening, and who knows from there. So that's kind of where I am thinking about this, given that it just seems like Israeli political leadership as a whole, it just doesn't, I just don't see anything that seems to give impressions of, oh, well, this could lend itself to a long-term ceasefire or some kind of more stabilized situation in the near future.
I think it's progressed too far. I mean, I'm not, we're in a strange new world, Danny. This is unprecedented. This is truly unprecedented. The amount of global animus that has been mobilized against Israel. This has never happened before, and this is deep-seated. Have you ever seen this level of support for the Palestinian cause globally? No, and I don't see it going away. And I think the more Israel doubles down on its hardline positions, the more deeply entrenched this anti-Israeli animus is. But it's not just political, because the Israelis have shown absolute indifference to international opinion, especially if the United States is able to shield them at the Security Council with our veto. But this is becoming about the economy, and the Israeli economy is their Achilles heel here. For the Israeli economy to work, this is why Benjamin Netanyahu was such a big believer in, the Biden's, India, Middle East economic corridor, because it made Israel, relevant economically to the region, made it a key player. Well, that ain't ever going to happen now. Okay, Israel will never be part of a India, Middle East economic corridor. It just isn't going to happen. I mean, not Israel the way it is currently. And that means that Israel now is not going to be the expansive economy that it was hoping to be, plugged into the Middle East, sort of a facilitator that can profit off of different projects here or there. And I think you're going to see the Israeli economy start to shrink. Investment opportunities are going to go away. And Israel is going to become a very, very poor nation. And the United States isn't going to be able to write that check. And so people are going to flee. And I think the depopulation of Israel is a very real possibility. And in order for Israel to become a place where people can stay, to get that kind of economic viability, it's going to need international engagement by the nations that right now are ostracizing Israel and condemning Israel. And so Israel will have to undertake specific changes. If Israel doesn't want to do this, then it will be destroyed by its own, inertia, so to speak. Israel has to make changes to survive. This is the reality, I believe. And in many ways, this is actually a good thing, because it means that there can be victory over Israel without destroying Israel with military power. It doesn't require the Arab nations to all the Arab nations have to do. When I talk about losing the street, it's not that the street's going to say, Saudi Arabia's, bomb Israel today. It's going to be Saudi Arabia, stop doing business with Israel. United Arab Emirates, stop doing business with Israel. Just a total absolute, we're just not doing business with you. And that's economic starvation, and that's societal collapse, and it's going to require political change to rectify it, or Israel goes away. And Israel will go away. All these people that live in Israel right now, they have places they can call home. There's very few Israelis that can say, we know no other place than Israel. Almost all of them can say, well, no, we got relatives in Spain, we got relatives in Italy. They can go other places. Many of them have passports to these other lands. A lot of them will come back to America. Many will go back to England, France, Italy, Spain, Russia, Ukraine. They could all go someplace else, and then there's nothing left. And that's what I believe is going to happen if Israel doesn't change the direction that it's on right now. I think Israel has lost this conflict strategically. They've done it to themselves.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.